HATENA no TOU, Tower of Children, also known as Arcana of Paradise, The Tower, outside of Japan, is a roguelike deck builder game from developer and publisher Shueisha Games from April 2023, released only physically in Japan though. And oh boy, this game will annoy you in certain aspects because it's either annoyingly repetitive or annoyingly underdeveloped, but let's go step by step here, and this time I will tackle the story last because I have to go into spoilers there, somewhat. You decide if you like the graphics and style of the game. I quite like it. It has personality, simplistic child-friendly drawings, let's say. The whole game has somewhat of a somber tone to it, and the characters move like ragdollish in a way, and that's not necessarily a bad thing actually. I had no idea about how this game would look like or anything before buying it, because I prefer to buy things a bit blind, and I was pleasantly surprised by this simple but still charming look. But for some reason the animations aren't fluent at all. I don't know if this was a stylistic choice or not, but it looks weird. Just as charming is the music, and yes, I quite like it. Rather than me explaining it because I suck at explaining shit, I will give you a taste of it even though I might be copyrighted. So, here we go. So you have this tower and your goal is to bring all 20 kids down because at the bottom is paradise. Supposedly. While running down you will encounter enemies that are trying to stop you, but not on every floor. Often you will meet these creatures that look the same as the enemies, and they will either help or screw you in a non-combative way. For example, Death might even kill both children if you give him the wrong answer, but he still almost kills you either way. Or this old witch, if you take 2 of her misery cards, then she will appear again further down the road and ask for 3 misery cards in return. If you give her at least one of those, then you will receive a paradise card you can choose from. There are more creatures like these, and essentially this is the game's way to help you out with more cards on top of the cards you will get after every battle, depending on the mode you are in, of course. And granted, in the beginning you have to figure out how the game even works properly, but it's not all that hard to understand. So, in the beginning you will only have 2 children available to send to the tower, but as you move on, you will find and save other children. While there are 20 children total, you only have 9 children available per run. And for some reason many of them can't fight from the beginning. They always have to be baptized first to be able to fight, and that only happens in a certain day. I really don't understand the idea behind this. Each character has their own set of cards, and all use either physical attacks, magical attacks, or a mix of both, and each character has their own deck. But you have to gain enough EXP to unlock certain cards that the character cannot use yet. But no, you cannot replace those until then. Once a battle starts, your hand is shown and you can choose what to do next. Sword attacks, shield defense, sword and shield is either one depending on how the card is turned. These cards heal you, these are magic cards and the elements are fire, water and wind. Later you can unlock thunder and meteor. This is cash that can be used to do damage as well, but is mostly needed for something else and a few more types of cards. These are slightly more complicated. These essentially are a mix of both physical and magical, and as you can see, these have hands on them that show a number of fingers or thumb. These are called seals. Closed fist is similar to a physical attack, these 2 fingers are wind magic, these 5 fingers are heal magic, and so on. Technically, you can use these however you like, but there is a massive advantage to gain here, which makes these cards more powerful as long as you have all seals. If you combine these cards in order from 0 fingers, 1 finger, 2 fingers, etc., and then back to 0 fingers, then you will reach max power, well, technically, and do massive damage, like here. You will 5-finger death punch everybody to oblivion, at least in the normal difficulty. This will change in the hard difficulty, but still, you will do a lot of damage. Using the physical cards like swords can also be very powerful if you chain them together, and these guys usually have more defensive power than the rest of the group. Similar works with magic, however, magic usually takes a few seconds to be unleashed. During those seconds though, you can stack every other kind of magic on top of the first magic. The ball gets bigger and way more powerful in the process. However, fire will cancel water and vice versa, so pay attention to that. Meteor necessarily has to be the first card that's used before the stacking, because otherwise it will stop the casting, and while Thunder, unlike all other spells, can attack instantly, it cannot be stacked if it's used as first magic. This is quite an interesting and fun battle system, and since everything is in real time, you will get a kick out of the strategy as well, the speed aspect. So just think and react fast, especially in the hard difficulty. You don't necessarily have to use all cards in your deck, you can always discard your current hand for new cards, but there are a few problems in the whole battle system. For one, there always seems to be a delay when you try to use cards at the start of, well, actually every battle. It looks like the game for a brief second is still loading the transition between you walking around and the start of the battle, even though you are already in the battle. A similar thing also happens when you manage to counter an enemy's attack and they get stunned. When this happens, everything goes into slow motion for a second or two, and as a result, every input gets delayed. One really annoying aspect is that sometimes the characters have something to say during battle, especially when they are in rage mode or near death. And while that's fine because it actually adds more character to, well, the characters, when you are trying to be fast but a text constantly pops up, then it gets insanely annoying. This is probably the worst aspect in the game, or at least one of the worst. The game also lacks a bit of enemy variety, because the goal is to get all 20 children to the bottom of the tower, because supposedly there is paradise. This means you will have to go through the tower at least 15 times. And this is not counting the times you will have to return to your base midway through because there is a blockade or because you are near death and you decide to go back to recover. And just after the very first tower run, let's call it, from top to bottom, you will have seen almost every single enemy there is to see or to fight, which makes the game really monotonous after a while. The final bosses are the only ones that change depending on these conditions. 1. The time of day will decide which final boss you will see. For that to change, you have to bring the first kids down during the day, restart the game, it will change to noon, and bring the next kids down. And then it changes to night when you restart the game again, and then bring the last two. However, you still need to bring 9 kids down even though only 2 are missing. 2. Once there is only 1 child, then the final boss will be different because it will be one of the gods in the game. 3. Those gods are also different depending on the answers you give throughout the game. Either you believe in paradise or you don't. But again, outside of these exceptions, the enemies are all the same, beaten the exact same way. I mean, each enemy has a certain tactic you can use to beat them without taking much damage, but other than that, the game needs... it needed more variety, considering you have to go down the tower so many times. Once you are able to draw 6 cards at once, why are the cards outside of the screen? Stuff like this shows a real lack of polish. Just reduce the size of the cards. So the currency in the game is not money, it's bread. Well, it's something like a currency. The characters will need bread for essentially everything, from eating 1 bread each day per person to survive, rebaptizing the characters, which will change their third ability and maybe enhance their stats, upgrading the top of the tower, using as a healing item during battle, or using it as, well, currency to pay creatures you meet in your journey. But not every creature accepts the bread, or maybe they do, but to unlock their cards, which are just collectibles, essentially, just like the cards of the characters, you need to pay them in a specific way or defeat them a certain amount of times. This is something I actually like because it adds a puzzle aspect to the game, trying to find out how to unlock these cards. At least if you want them. Using the bread doesn't directly upgrade your base or unlock a new facility, however you want to describe it, because first you need to give your holy tree the bread, wait 1 day, and then the tree will let you choose what you want to, well, upgrade or unlock, whatever. These upgrades are essentially buffs for you pre-tower entry or during the exploration. I've mentioned that the characters need to be baptized first before being able to battle. Rebaptizing them will unlock their third ability and possibly increase the character's stats as mentioned. But you will never know when the stats will be increased, and even the third ability is reduced to the same 5, maybe 6 abilities for all characters. Pyromancer, which increases fire attacks, Herbologist that increase the effects of healing items, etc. This random nature is fine in itself, but there needed to be more abilities from rebaptizing the kids and something like an EXP meter so we know when their stats will be increased. There is one upgrade you can get that will make the game more difficult than it actually is, because you will start off in the normal difficulty. If you go to this area, you can change from Paradise, which is the normal difficulty, to Purgatory, which is the hard difficulty. There are only 2 differences to note here, or at least 2 major ones. Obviously, Purgatory is harder to beat, and you will see black mist all around the tower. While the enemies are all the same, they have more HP, are faster, and have a bit more attack variety than the ones in Paradise. So if you want a challenge, then this is it, and actually this made the game a lot better, but also more annoying. Not because it's more difficult though, because actually this will happen on both difficulties and regarding every enemy. The problem comes because after a while the characters will start attacking on their own with their base attack. In itself that would be fine, but depending on the enemy, especially this one, if you want to wait for the counter-attack message from the enemy to disappear, but the character starts attacking on their own, then it gets insanely annoying because any kind of strategy you would have flies right out the window. On this aspect, the real-time mechanic really damages the battle system. But another difference in Purgatory is that once the kids go down the tower and reach the supposed paradise, their drawings will be at the base of the tower. This does not happen in the normal difficulty, so maybe Purgatory is the real ending? I've beat the game, but I don't want to spoil it, so play it for yourself. Finally, there is the story. You control the kids and your goal is to bring them to paradise, at least that's what they believe it is. And to do that, they have to go down this tower, and each time they return to the top, for whatever reason, they always forget what they were doing. But who are these kids? Well, each kid has a profile, they interact with one another sometimes, and their 100% affinity picture will add a new perspective, and because of this, I assume that they all lived at some point but died for unknown reasons. At least that's what I get out of it. That's why there even are pictures of them in the seemingly real world, right? The descriptions under those pictures may explain how they died, but only some may explain it, while in others it remains a mystery. Examples like Gabu, a kid that stole to survive. Anybody can assume that he tried to steal something at some point after this picture or memory or whatever, but someone took him out. And if Gabu is dead, then that could explain it. But then there are examples like Ishii that liked to draw, and that's about it actually. I really don't get it, and I mean, sure, you can interpret almost anything regarding any ending. Why the kids are even in the tower, or why their memory gets erased each time they return. In itself that's fine and quite an interesting idea, but then again the game does very little with it. It doesn't explain enough, and thus it doesn't engage you enough either, and as a result you will not care about the kids nearly as much as the game wants you to. You won't much care about the story either because it's barely explained. But the question isn't only who the kids are or why they assumingly died, but also why they are in this tower and what makes it special. Why is, let's call it God, seemingly tormenting the kids by resetting their memories each time they return to base and so on. Once you take the last kid and try to conquer the tower top to bottom, the enemies will talk to you. My impression is that these enemies were once human ghosts, or beings or whatever, like the kids, but since they could not conquer the tower, they got trapped in it, and over time they morphed into these creatures? I have absolutely no idea. But again, maybe this was done on purpose, so you, as a player, could interpret everything however you wanted. Who knows? Funny though, the game reminded me immediately of Shingeki no Kyojin, or better yet, Yakusoku no Neverland. Because, let's be honest, the premise is somewhat similar. It's about a kid or several kids that just know the place they have been living in, being it inside a wall or on top of the tower, but want to know what is beyond those barriers. Again, this is an interesting idea, but it doesn't develop all that well and leaves you, as the player, alone eating dust for no reason. Overall though, this is not a bad game at all. It has a lot of charm, it looks and sounds nice, and has very nice ideas. I like the real-time roguelike card battle aspect and several other systems. However, the game doesn't shine as much and is way behind of what it could have been, and that's a shame.